It was a simple training exercise. We had all heard about how dangerous humans can be on the surface of a planet, or anywhere below the thermosphere for that matter. We also understood this after what had just happened out in space. For most of us, it is severe dread and fear when we even enter the exosphere of a planet that humans control for one of these exercises. I believe they refer to it as pucker factor. Before we even get a chance to land on the planet, our battle group needed to clear space around the planet. Using the training munitions, we figured it would be a simple job for them. Many of those waiting to get dropped on the planet figured it would be a smooth ride. You see, if a ship is counted as disabled, it has to fire its retro thrusters and go quiet. This can be rather abrupt for anyone not strapped in. Ships considered lost need to immediately turn and exit the battle space. Normally we lose a few ships, but the majority simply continue on through the human lines. Before this session, the most we lost was a few corvettes and maybe a frigate. Now, it seems as though every ship has to turn about and exit the battle space in only a few standard minutes. We were informed we would have to try again. We believed it to be a joke until the standard flip and burn was executed, making most of its crew wipe our scales across the walls and the decks. After losing again, we're simply informed that we would be able to make planetfall as the human ships stood down. What an insult. That is, until everyone on board looked out at the human ships. These were far better warships than we had faced before. Planetfall is performed with shuttles as we hated the humans' insistence on pods. Inside the shuttles, the calming light of yellow strayed on. It would pulsate if the shuttle was engaged, turn red if the shuttle was hit, and pulsate red if the shuttle was destroyed. On the way to the surface, inside every shuttle, the yellow light began to pulsate as the shuttles began evasive maneuvers. The sounds of countermeasures filled the air with the groans of the soldiers being tossed around and nearly broken bones racked against the shuttle as it desperately tried to evade fire. Those inside also could hear the shuttle captain screaming about incoming fire and the response about not knowing if there's anything on sensors as the human atmospheric fighters flew so close that the shuttles shook even harder, almost as though the fighter pilots on the human side are playing with them. It is clear when they are done playing, as inside the shuttle's light suddenly changes to red, but only for a moment before the pulsation begins. On the ground, the shuttle pilots can only look in amazement as every single shuttle pulsated a red light out the cockpit and out the loading ramps. Not a single one showed yellow. Those in the shuttles were told, continue mission. However, they would not be receiving any air support. This suited the ground pounders just fine, as they believe this is their chance to show these furry freaks how to fight. Before each group deploys, everyone needs to double check their detecting gear. This training gear is essential, and being caught disabling it will make your entire species a laughingstock, as in, they think you couldn't actually make it through without cheating. This passive piece of equipment is not only required for a fair contest, but the information given about injuries is essential. The only part that sucked was that it gave you a shock when you were hit. It didn't matter what species, you never wanted to get pegged in the groin, especially with that zap. The ground pounders, the invaders, didn't believe that they would have an issue as they had a trick up their sleeves against the human. Well, if they wore sleeves, that is. They brought a type of detection equipment. Detection equipment they have can pick up any communications and body heat. They know that humans will send messages to each other, which is very common, which will give away their position. If a human gets close, their homothermic bodies will definitely betray them, and everyone can get ready to spring an ambush. Turning on the equipment, they found nothing. No heat, no signals, no nothing. Odd. but that made movement easy. As the different groups, about the size of a platoon, left to take their individual objectives, many commented that it will be as simple to claim glory as the humans are simply not around. This led them to being complacent. As they walked along, many of them scraping their claws on the rocks and stone on the way by, they all wanted to take their objectives early. As they walked, the ones in charge of the detection software would simply be listening intently as a strange pulse would be heard, believing it to be nothing more than atmospheric bounce from the humans' short-wave antiques. They continued pushing forward, hard. In their rush, they didn't even look behind them. If they had, the platoon members would have realized that the number of their groups kept getting smaller and smaller over time. In more than one instance, the officer that was in the front would call for his communications and receive nothing, simply calling out radio, turning around, and nothing would be there, nothing to see, not a single one of his men. Most were just confused and would freeze, with others thought that the ones they were leading would just be catching up soon. Only then would they turn around and end up looking at multiple humans in their new gear. In their gear, they almost didn't look human anymore, but they still had the standard bipedal form, no tails, no horns, or anything like that, of humans. This would make them all just go, "Oh, fuck me sideways." This was most common in forested areas. The invaders' biology made it best suited for a swamp and relied on their technology for the other areas. This is why the swamp was set up with a plethora of traps. These tripwires would make either an extremely loud noise disorienting things, send up a signal of burning magnesium so bright that the invaders would be seeing spots for an hour at least, or they would send out a pulse of light setting off their own training sensors, basically being a landmine. This was the annoyance of every platoon in the swamp. Eventually, the groups are either too deaf, too blind, just to continue, as they couldn't see the traps they were going into. This would lead the rest of their group to be taken out and have to walk back to the shuttles in shame. Those smart enough to wait for the effects to wear off began to get paranoid. Very paranoid. The humans seemed to appear out of nowhere as they would rise out of the water next to an opponent and take them out before anyone could even respond, even realize what was going on. Or they would rise out of the waters like demons and begin spraying into the group with reckless abandonment. After those that had walked back to the shuttle passed the humans, many could hear them say how they hoped someone got a recording of the action, preferably in a slower motion, as it looked like something they called Chuck Norris. The one group that had to pass through a desert didn't perform any better, as the dunes seemed to come alive around them. In the dark of night, more and more of the opposing force seemed to simply disappear. Even looking across the dunes revealed nothing until the officer fell into a pit as he walked. The pit surprisingly contained two humans that quickly used their shock blades to dispatch the officer. When the humans stood up, they found many training weapons pointing at them, and the second in command screaming, "Where are the other humans? This is not all of you, I know that. Where are the rest?" Though they could not see the humans' faces through their new masks, everyone knew the humans were actually showing their teeth, as one of them simply stated, "Look around you." As the group did, the same group could see that they were surrounded by humans that seemed to appear out of nowhere from a distance of 2 to 50 meters away. The second in command turned back to the humans in the hole just in time to see them disappear into the hole itself. The number 2 of the opposing forces had just enough time to say his version of "shit" before his entire platoon was annihilated in a blaze of training fire. The attackers could not understand how they had been beaten. They had better technology, but it seemed that to do absolutely no good. During the after-action review, the leader of the Scale Tits lowered his head as he was ashamed that his forces had been beaten so thoroughly, not only in space, but during planetfall and on the surface. He knew the humans would not release all their secrets, of course. That's just common practice, as he had asked how they were able to hide their body heat. It was kind of obvious from the suit they wore. However, not everything was obvious. There was something he just needed to know more than anything else. You see, everyone starts in a certain location, but it didn't make sense. Something was off. The leader of the Scale Tits asked, "How could you accurately traverse such large areas so effectively? We could not detect your positioning systems. Do you have a new type of jamming device, perhaps?" The command sergeant major simply looked. "We know you guys can lock onto those, so we left them behind. You can't detect what's not there." The leader of Scale Tits was a bit confused and continued, "Then how did you travel so far? Surely you do not have that much knowledge of this planet. It is a training planet. No one lives here. Did you perhaps start this exercise outside your designated starting zone?" This was actually a massive insult, as it implied that the humans cheated so they could win. The sergeant major was more than a little pissed. "Everything was performed to standard, and we can prove that. You lost because we can traverse an area like this planet with ease by using other equipment." "What navigational equipment could possibly leave no electronic signature?" The command sergeant major turned to one of his subordinates that handed him two items. As he retrieved them, he tried not to grin, realizing that the Scale Tits hadn't realized that the interference they were getting was a simple data pulse, something humans had figured out a long time ago. Instead of calling over the radio, they would type the message out and then send it. It was one quick pulse, which the Scale Tits had not figured out that's what it was, nor did they have any idea how to decode it. This is how their spotters were able to actually find where the Scale Tit group were going and get in position in time. After that, all they needed was the two items that the sergeant major was now showing the leader of the Scale Tits. The leader was confused. You can actually traverse topography with just a piece of colorful foliage and a magnetic wire?" The sergeant major, trying not to smile, simply said, "Yep, good old map and compass. We can outmaneuver anyone you send with just these." Being able to find someone using such primitive implements is completely unheard of, yet something they would have to look into. Looking at how they were able to use such primitive equipment to actually outmaneuver and outfight his own, the leader of the Scale Tits was humbled and just smart enough to realize humans might not just be the cute little furry, squishy animals they thought. After the training event was over, the stories of how humans are able to get so close enough that they can kill entire brigades without making a sound. The next species scheduled to actually train with the humans actually declined the offer. When the human leadership was confused and simply asked for a reason, they simply received a message saying, "Humans are scary." Hello everybody, it's Syntax. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Before I go, I need to send some really big thank yous to a couple of my supporters. The first thank you going out to the Sir. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. And also going out to our big man in Germany, Grog Vaughn. Thank you also for supporting the channel. To everyone else, I'll catch you on the next one. This is Syntax, punching out.